Okay, today we are diving into a truly fascinating, highly structured worldview. It's based on a text called Selfishness is the Stumbling Block to Heaven, and it comes directly from Guy Shufang, the founder of Life Chan Wan. Whether you're a deep philosophy nerd or completely new to this whole line of thinking, we're going to neutrally unpack the really striking claims he makes about human nature, our daily suffering, and his, quite frankly, radical path to ultimate peace.
So think about this. We all experience worry, anxiety, and discontent, right? It's just part of life. But Zhuefeng's philosophy doesn't start by pointing fingers at external things like your stressful job or the economy. Instead, he asks us to turn inward and deeply question the root of all these universal human struggles. He looks at how people are so frequently unsettled, angry, jealous, or just generally pessimistic and asks, why? Why is it so incredibly hard for us to just be content with our daily existence?
And this quote perfectly captures his core diagnosis. He sets up this really sharp divide between what he calls the sage and the laity, basically the everyday person. The idea is that the sage achieves true greatness, a real connection to the vast universe, by putting themselves absolutely last. In stark contrast, the everyday person, well, they find only worry, suffering, and ultimately spiritual death because they constantly put themselves first.
So here is the absolutely crucial point. According to this philosophy, all of our daily misery, it doesn't come from our circumstances, it's not bad luck, and it's definitely not other people's fault. It comes strictly, 100% from our own selfishness. In the Life Churning on worldview, selfishness isn't just some minor character flaw you can brush off. It's the literal root cause of every single negative emotion you experience. If you are unhappy, it is simply because you are holding on to self-interest. Now, to solve this very earthly problem of constant misery, Shui Feng posits that we have to aim for a state like heaven. But wait, his definition of heaven is highly, highly specific. It's not just some destination in the clouds, it's a condition. It is a place entirely defined by the absolute absence of selfish behavior. Because literally, nobody is selfish there. It naturally, almost automatically becomes a place of perfect peace, perfect harmony, and true happiness. But that brings up a huge question. How on earth do we build a bridge to that heaven right here, right now? Well, Xu Feng realized that just going around telling people to stop being selfish doesn't actually work in our current society. It's impossible. So he established what he calls the second home, also known as the new oasis for life. He describes this as a physical and spiritual transit station. And its main objective? To systematically eliminate human selfishness on the journey toward heaven. This sets up a really stark contrast between our normal, everyday societal structures and the radical rules of this second home. The text actually argues that the teachings of past sages, figures like Jesus, Buddha, or Lao Tzu, are basically impossible to fully practice unless you're in the right environment. In a traditional life, you're literally forced to compete and protect your own stuff. So this new life mode is engineered from the ground up to completely replace that old programming with an entirely new societal structure. To actually rip out the fertile soil where all this selfishness grows, the text lays out some incredibly radical requirements. Step 1, residents have to completely dissolve their traditional marriages and family units. No small thing, right? Step 2, they must give up all personal property. And step 3 is entering what Xu Feng calls paradise management. The underlying logic here is pretty straightforward. If you are in a traditional marriage or family, you are essentially forced into being selfish because you have to protect and provide for your specific little unit against everybody else. So, what does this paradise management actually look like in practice? Well, by completely removing personal property and family units, suddenly there's no power, no position, no fame, and no wealth left to chase. There are absolutely no special, exclusive relationships to jealously guard. And at the same time, the community itself steps in to provide for all basic needs: food, clothes, housing, even care for the elderly and sick. By removing the biological need to survive or compete, the community theoretically wipes out the very situations that trigger us to act selfishly in the first place. Okay, so without possessions, careers, or special relationships stressing them out, what do these people actually do all day? The text outlines a life totally refocused on the spiritual. Residents spend their time on self-cultivation, playing games, and just enjoying entertainment. The whole goal is to spend your energy purely on exhibiting sincerity, kindness, and beauty. You're just working to repay your spiritual debts and accumulate merit for that ultimate journey toward heaven. Now, looking at this highly controlled, seemingly utopian setup, you might be thinking, does this environment just instantly cure human nature? Like, do people step foot into the second home and magically lose all their worldly greed and jealousy overnight? Well, that leads us to a really fascinating reality check from the source text.
The surprising answer from Guide Shufeng is a flat, unambiguous no. Even in this carefully engineered environment, totally stripped of property or traditional families, people are still selfish. The text freely admits that human beings harbor incredibly deep-seated habits. All that traditional thinking and the consciousness formed in your old lifestyle, yeah, that doesn't just evaporate overnight, even when your environment changes so drastically.
Overcoming that deeply ingrained nature requires nonstop, active work. Shufeng refers to this intensive process as cultivating the soul garden. And let me be clear, it's not some passive experience where the community just does the heavy lifting for you. It requires continuous, conscious effort from every single individual to constantly weed out their old thoughts, aggressively unlearn their traditional life values, and actively adopt this entirely new, selfless way of existing. So what happens if someone drops the ball and fails to cultivate their soul garden? Well, the community utilizes a very strict elimination mechanism. If a member is just too slow to adopt the new values and keeps acting selfishly, they simply cannot stay in the transit station. They will eventually be eliminated. That means either they choose to leave on their own because the adaptation is too hard, or they are officially removed by the New Life program itself.
The text draws an absolute, completely unforgiving dichotomy here. It argues that a truly selfless person literally cannot survive in a traditional marriage and family, simply because the traditional world strictly demands self-interest just to function. And conversely, a selfish person simply cannot survive in the second home. These two modes of living are entirely, fundamentally incompatible with the opposing states of mind.
To really drive this point home, Shafeng launches into this rapid-fire philosophical barrage. He directly links literally every modern human action right back to pure selfishness. Why are you angry? Because you're selfish. Why are you pessimistic? Selfishness. But he goes even further. Why do you start a business? Not for innovation, not to provide jobs, but fundamentally because you are selfish.
This relentless repetition just keeps coming, and it's explicitly designed to shatter our deepest, most comfortable assumptions. Why do you get married? To possess someone, because you're selfish. Why do you complain or gossip or take revenge? Because you always put your own ego and desires first. He argues that almost everything we consider totally normal in society, from marriage to building wealth to simple everyday gossip, stems from a deep desire to prioritize ourselves over the whole.
Having fully diagnosed the disease of selfishness and offered up the radical cure of the second home, Shufeng finally contrasts the ultimate destinations of our behaviors. And he completely strips away any kind of middle ground here. He leaves the reader with a stark binary choice between two opposing paths, based entirely on how much of your own ego you are actually willing to surrender. According to the text, the universe, which is referred to here as the Tao, is essentially a neutral force. It simply grants what your actions invite. If you actively choose to hold on to your ego, your possessions, and your specific little relationships, you are quite literally asking for conflict. So the text is blunt. If you want troubles, tragedies, and hell, be selfish. The Tao will gladly meet your wish and deliver you exactly the misery you've engineered for yourself. Conversely, completely shedding your personal property, your exclusive relationships, and your individual ambition is presented as the singular, guaranteed key to paradise. If you actually manage to cultivate your soul garden and become truly selfless, the Tao will support that as well. The universe will perfectly align to help you realize your dream of reaching heaven, rewarding your complete lack of self-interest with absolute, unbroken peace and harmony. So, as we wrap up this exploration, whether you view Guide Shefeng's second home as a fascinating utopian paradise or just a totally radical departure from society, his central challenge is really hard to ignore. You have to ask yourself, are the things you hold closest right now, your wealth, your status, even your most exclusive relationships, actually the very stumbling blocks preventing you from finding true peace? Really think about that. Thanks for joining me to unpack this today.